So can we just at least be blunt about how this is an escalation of war?
One, it's not. Two, I'm pretty sure Russia has like the second most advanced air defense systems. I don't think a 70s plane is going to make it through the Russian defenses to bomb missile systems inside Russia. Idiots. Fucking hell.
President Biden has informed the G7 allies here that the United States has agreed to allow Ukrainian pilots to begin training to fly American-made F-16 fighter jets. This move represents a major reversal for Biden and a wish fulfilled for Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who has pleaded for F-16s for months.
Oh, goody, an escalation of war. Now, in this case, as you heard in that report, the Biden administration will now allow our European allies to transfer American-made F-16s to Ukraine, something that was considered a red line by the Biden administration previously, especially when we're dealing with another nuclear power, Russia. And of course,
it was a red line because of arms sales risk.
Also, nuclear threats. Okay. Yeah, we definitely haven't heard that before. It's definitely not a trumpet being played all the time. It's just like China's red lines. There's always a red line. There's always a nuclear threat. Are we just going to take him seriously?
Vladimir Putin has responded to this by threatening nuclear war with the United States, which is unsurprising. It's not the first time he's done it. But, you know, maybe sending over offensive weaponry to Ukraine, not the best idea. And there is no end in sight for...
What's defensive weaponry?
I mean, every weapon sent, I guess.
They can only be interceptors. Anything that can be used kinetically to give people owies can't be sent.
This war. In fact, the idea of sending F-16s to Ukraine makes it abundantly clear that the United States and its allies intend to continue engaging in this war for at least 18 months, possibly more, because there's some training necessary in order to...
If Ukraine falls, then why would we keep training them after 17 months? Like, Ukraine could... Why can't Ukraine just fall? You know, what if Russia loses the war before 17 months are over? Are we going to prevent Russia from losing the war? We're gonna go on the other side and be like, no, you can't leave Russia. We haven't made all our money yet.
You must continue this war.
What do you think is going to happen? And then they're going to be like, well, they didn't go to the negotiation table. Whoa.
Whoa.
To ensure that members of Ukraine's military are able to operate F-16s. We'll get to all those details in just a moment. Now, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has been asking for F-16 since the beginning of this war, and the United States, under Biden's leadership, had refused to do so. They saw it as an escalation of war. The next video has some more details on this.
The F-16, the backbone of the U.S. air fleet, can travel twice the speed of sound, drop bombs on ground targets, and fire air-to-air missiles. Ukraine believes these planes provide a distinct advantage in the skies, enabling them to shoot...
Why are they showing this? Why are they showing Bakhmut getting bombed by Russia when talking about the F-16?
Hilarious. They act like the twice the speed of sound is like this super impressive thing where it's actually not. It's like
jet go fast, jet have missile, jet have bomb,
jet go fast.
Down incoming cruise missiles and fighter jets, fending off Russia's punishing air assaults. But up till now, providing F-16s has been a red line for President Biden, reluctant to provoke an unpredictable escalation from Russia. Still, in a February interview with David, Biden did leave the door open just a crack.
We know President Zelensky continues to say what he really needs are F-16s. Will you send F-16s?
Look, we're sending him.
Biden's rhetoric on this has not changed.
No, it hasn't.
It's literally the standard doctrine for foreign policy with arm transfers. You can't get more textbook about how you don't give them all this shit at once because you need calculated risk. Why? Because you don't want them to take your Tomcats like Iran did. And you don't want ISIS to take your Abrams tanks. Easily a terrorist cell could spring up. Like, imagine an accelerationist terrorist cell. Boom, springs up in Ukraine. Real dangerous people. They start taking the tanks. They can use Russia's gear too, you know? What would happen then?
I think most of Ukraine has dismantled those for parts.
I know. I'm just saying, like, if you have to think about this in the beginning, if Ukraine lost really quickly, an insurgent outcome would be more likely.
Yeah, and also,
our seasoned military thinks he needs now.
You don't think he needs F-16s now?
No, he doesn't.
If I pause it again,
that was what he said in February, but clearly he has now changed his tune. Now, for the moment being, there's no indication that the United States is going to transfer its F-16s to Ukraine. It's just that our allies will be doing so. But let's keep it real. Eventually, the United States will be doing so as well.
I don't know.
Because it's an opportunity for, we know what it's an opportunity for. Send them more weapons, That creates a need for the United States to replenish its weaponry. And that means more money for the defense contractors who are absolutely salivating over this war that is now quickly becoming an endless war. And I'll explain more of that in just a moment. But Cenk, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah. So guys, the administration is partly worried about it because it's
like the other thing is, okay, the US sends their F-16s. What are they replacing them with? Planes they've already paid for? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, because they take the government contract so long in advance.
like
They
think about it, right?
Space on the shelf for like shit that's coming off the press.
Like think about it, right? You've got the F-35s, you've got the F-15EX, you've got the F-22s, which aren't being made anymore, but it's still the same point. They've already got planes to replace the F-16s. Who gives a fuck? They're just going to go into the plane graveyard.
Is coming from, right? You'll hear this all the time where NATO would be like, hey, we're spending too many shells. We don't have enough shells in our stockpile, right? Because NATO's job is not to care about Ukraine. It's to make sure they have a certain percentage.
Yeah.
Our government is undercutting the defense industry by doing this stuff.
Yeah, because they're giving them to them for free, right?
No, well, not always. It's all stuff where basically you could call it a debt trap if you actually want to criticize it. But the thing is like the Pentagon doesn't want to send any planes because it's the Pentagon's job to defend us, not Ukraine, at the end of the day. But also the Pentagon rated Ukraine's defense an 11 out of 10. They said that we don't know how they literally were above the Pentagon's expectations in defense.
Interesting.
And that rating by the Pentagon is what authorized those Abrams tanks, I think.
An escalation. I would say that's the minority concern. They're not really talking about the majority concern, which they mentioned in some articles, but they mentioned it in passing as if it's the smaller concern. I don't think so at all, for reasons I'll explain here. The larger concern is they don't want the technology to fall into the wrong hands, mainly the Russian hands, because it's one thing for the Ukrainians to have an F-16. It's another thing for an F-16.
How old is the F-16?
I believe they first went into service in 1970s. So around the time they gave the Tomcats to Iran.
Interesting. And what is China's ripoff F-16 called?
It is the Chengdu J-10. It looks almost exactly the same.
How did they get the technology? How did they rip that off? How did they get hold of the technology to produce an F-16 ripoff?
So this article says in the 1980s, the US partnered with Israel to develop the F-16. So it turns out that the American officials discovered that Israel sold the development.
That's the thing. Israel would do this. Israel would do this. That's the thing. That is such Israel policy, right?
That is hilarious.
Israel's policy is that they only care about Israel. They are what people think America is in a lot of ways. So even if you're working with Mossad and you're in Israel, like they will actively like show that they're tailing you and observing you and all this shit. Like they actively like make their presence known and harass you if you're an intelligence agency in Israel, even if you're working with them.
The Shenyang J-11 is a ripoff of the Sukhoi Su-27, so they have Russian copycats as well. The Shenyang J-15 is a copycat of the Sukhoi Su-33, so 2 Russian ripoffs. They have a ripoff of the Reaper drone. They have a ripoff of the MiG-21. A ripoff of the F-22. They have a ripoff of the F-35. This is not an issue.
And then they also got a top secret drone because it got shot down by Iran.
Yes.
With the Beast of Kandahar. It's like a RX something. It's the drone. I think we were using it when it was the
RQ-170 Sentinel.
Yeah, I think we used it to kill Bin Laden. Well, it was Overwatch for killing Bin Laden. Yeah. But it's like a super stealth drone. Iran basically got a knockoff of that, and they gave this shit to China too.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we don't have to worry about it ending up in the wrong hands, I guess.
Yeah. It's not an issue, and it's also an old plane.
F-16 to get shot down in area controlled by Russia, where they could then just take the F-16 and reverse engineer it, right? And so now you might think, well, okay, that's a real national security issue for us because F-16s are excellent, and it's a rare thing we do right in the U.S. military in terms of technology, and so that could be a national security problem for us. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit of a concern too. But the larger concern is the people that sell the F-16 don't want anyone else to be able to produce cheaper F-16s without going through them.
They already do.
The defense contractors.
You know what? That is the most important part of the story, guys. I mean, God forbid.
Who else is going to produce a cheaper F-16 than China?
Literally nobody. Maybe India.
Bro, they care because they don't want them used against NATO. Just look at fucking Iran, dude. It's literally not hard to fucking understand this policy.
They're really bad
that
at
these
what they
defense
do.
contractors, these these military grade weaponry manufacturers have some competition. I mean, that's the real war we should be concerned about, Ugur.
Exactly, but isn't it interesting that the media doesn't mention that?
No, it's not interesting. It's the most expected part of the story imaginable.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we went through the same thing with the M1 Abrams tank earlier in this war, and so the defense.
We have internal competitions because of how we do contracts. You know, like
They
think about
literally
how
lower
we do
it
the
up.
arms contracts, and think about the competition that already exists within these arms transfers. The competition we have for the arms industry inside America is already insane.
Defense contractors are super nervous about their beloved technology, which they have now, taken billions, if not trillions of dollars off the hands of U.S. and taxpayers in Northern Europe, et cetera. That technology.
Where's his evidence? So the Pentagon obviously doesn't want planes transferred. Okay, so he's saying that these would be lobbyists, right? That wouldn't want their things transferred, right?
Theoretically.
Is that what he's saying? So the lobbyists, these companies don't want their things falling in enemy hands, and that's why they don't want their product to be sold to Ukraine?
Possibly.
Is that what he's okay? That's weird that a greedy arms manufacturer would not want to make money off of something, isn't it?
Very strange.
Fall into hands that would allow them to not have a monopoly on those weapons, okay? And so that's the iceberg of this story that no one else is talking about. By the way, also true of the so-called Pentagon accounting error that you might have heard about. We're gonna talk about that later in the show.
Now, John Kirby, who's a spokesperson for the White House, sat down for an interview about this new decision to allow for F-16s to be sent to Ukraine. And the big question is, doesn't the Biden administration see this as an escalation of war? Why the 180 on this topic? Well, he claims no, not at all. Let's watch.
Just a short time ago, the Kremlin responded, calling this a, quote, colossal risk. President Biden's concern from the very beginning with providing F-16s was that it could potentially escalate this war. What assurances does the U.S. have from Ukraine that they won't use these F-16s to fire into Russia that could widen this war?
I'll tell you, Peter, we have had multiple conversations with the Ukrainians.
How you're going to take an F-16, right? Ukraine still has to pay for them if they get shot down, bro. So they're going to risk their brand new F-16. Well, it's not brand new. It's brand new to them. To go into a bombing mission in Russia. What kind of bombs do they have to deliver targets like that? They got the JDAM, right? I mean, how above your target do you got to be for that? They think missiles just can fly forever.
I really feel like they don't understand how it works.
That's how you lose your F-16 is to try to do a bombing run on Russia.
Insane.
About the risk of escalation here. Nobody wants to see World War III. And we have made it clear that we're not going to encourage or enable Ukraine to strike inside Russian territory. Now, the Ukrainians have been very honest with us and very forthcoming and quite frankly, very responsible when it comes to the kind of support we're giving them, not using that to go inside Russia.
Cool, I'm sure Ukraine would never do any type of offensive attack or would never even consider attacking Russia.
Yeah.
Except here's a story that broke today. Ukrainian official confirms group of Ukraine allied Russians crossed into Russian territory and attacked town. Let me give
what she's dropping the ball on here, where she has room to criticize, is that a lot of these guys in this team are really, really, really hyper accelerationist fascist types, there's some hardcore motherfuckers in this battalion. And I think Militant Wire has been covering this battalion a lot, talking about their extremism and stuff. But the one guy, he's very dwarf pilled that you'll see. By that I mean he looks like a dwarf guy there.
Also, what American weapons did they use? Oh no, they were using Russian helicopters. Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah, so the American weapons can only be used by certain people, and these people are not employed by the armed forces of Ukraine. A Ukraine version of Wagner. We don't know how much authority Ukraine has over these people,
if any.
If any. We would assume that they were well aware these people are going to attack into Russian territory, though. It's not like Ukraine was surprised by this.
Yeah, sure. Obviously they probably gave them a heads up. They're like, you can't stop us, but we're gonna do this.
And also, if Ukraine is supplying them with logistics, is that so obscene? The amount of people, look at the Kurds. Where would they be? We bomb shit for them, but where would they be without logistical help? Don't want to provide logistics for militia groups. I guess we're pro-ISIS now.
give you some more context, but before I do, Jenks, seems like you have some thoughts on this.
I do. Listen, guys, the Ukrainians are not going to want to violate an agreement with America because America could cut off further weapons, et cetera, that they need. So would they attack the Russians right away? No, unlikely with the F-16s. But it depends on how desperate they get. So let's say they think that we're not going to send them any more aid, which is a possibility at some point. They think, well, we already have the F-16s, and understand why they might want to use them inside Russia, because Russia is firing missiles at Ukraine from inside Russia. And the only way to stop those is to bomb them inside Russia. So it only depends on how desperate the Ukrainians are. Once they have them, they have them.
So can we just at least be blunt about how this is an escalation of war?
One, it's not. Two, I'm pretty sure Russia has like the second most advanced air defense systems. I don't think a 70s plane is going to make it through the Russian defenses to bomb missile systems inside Russia. Idiots.
The stealth planes, like when we bombed Serbia, a guy like basically manually targeted and took down one of these planes. Like
F-117,
like
right?
the outdated shit that he used to down that plane because he got lucky. Like he got lucky on just like a small like blip of like the radar lock, and that shit was old as fuck. The gear that was used to do that, it was also Russian made too back then.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, of course it was. I mean, who else was
I guess
equipping
it
the
was
Serbs?
Yugoslavia, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Or at least Yugo knockoff.
Come on, Cenk. Really?
It is.
Like,
I don't.
You really think Ukraine is under the impression that if they violate any agreement with the United States, that the United States would stop sending them weapons? Are you insane?
No, they
remember when
they absolutely would.
Remember when Saudi Arabia bombed a school bus in Yemen, and like that put a ton of pressure for us to dial back arms to Saudi Arabia? And like, yes, I know we're still selling arms to Saudi Arabia, but the point is that we're not selling as much. You know, we took, there was conditions for some of these bombs. It's like, bro, you used a U.S. bomb for what? With the drone program, we have stories on both sides. People would be like, oh, well, this Pakistan's drone. Oh, it was Saudi Arabia's drone. No, it was our drones the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, even then, it's like, we're not going to give them drones to use to bomb people. It's like, okay, you need drone support. We're going to send our own bombs in. That's the level they were on beforehand. So it's not the same like scale of relationship. Also, if we want to talk about who is still going to get weapons no matter what they do, we should talk about Israel selling the F-16s to China.
Come on.
And look, there's a reason why we would care. And a day we don't want instability because that could affect the stock market. So it's not like we have any pure motives, but we do have motives for not escalating past this. But this is definitely an escalation. And by the way, don't get me wrong. Will we escalate even further? It's enormously possible.
Pause.
It's lagging anyway.
Guys,
Okay. None of this would be happening if Russia didn't invade. Shut the fuck up. Let's go.
It's the whole like, oh, it'll hurt the stock market. We only care about the stock market.
Yeah.
Theater,
and at the end of the
as
day,
always, and the real world as always. And the theater is, my God, we care about those brave Ukrainians. And is there some truth to that? Yeah, I think there's some truth to that for some people, right? But that's mainly the theater. When you get to the real world is how much are people going to make off of it? And so it's not just the defense contractors, it's also the oil and gas industry. And we cut off the Russians' gas supply into Europe. Now we're replacing their supply. So, and then there's the banks who gambled on the gas, and there's the banks who gambled on the defense contractors. So there's a world like probably hundreds of billions of dollars here, not probably, definitely, on the line for all those different industries. And they're constantly sending lobbyists to talk to politicians, including the White House, lobby, to make themselves more money. They don't care about our interests, the Ukrainian interests, et cetera. And that is what's driving a lot of these decisions while the press puts on a play about
Ukrainians' interest was the F-16. So
they even said from the beginning.
Yeah. So so they don't care about Ukraine's interest. So that's why they're selling them F-16s.
2 years later.
Bro.
Or a year and a half later.
It's so stupid because it's like, well, why aren't we selling them F-35s then, dude? Why not? It's all about the profit motive, right?
Yeah, sell them the most expensive plane.
Yeah, sell them the most expensive shit. Cut them off a contract right now.
And if it's about testing weapons like some people have been saying, send them F-22s. If you really want to test them.
Oh, well, we already tested those on balloons.
In this, America's worried about escalation when in reality, most of the decision makers are worried about how much money everybody's going to make.
Let's discuss the decision maker, shall we? Namely, the national security advisor who played a key role in persuading Joe Biden to allow.
National security advisor played a key role in convincing to send weapons.
So he did his job.
He did his job. It's his job. This is some Bill O'Reilly bullshit right here.
For the transfer of the F-16s to Ukraine. and that person's name is Anthony Blinken. Now, what was Anthony Blinken up to after he was advising the Obama administration on foreign policy in Afghanistan? You know, the same foreign policy that extended and expanded upon Bush-era trash foreign policy. What did he do after that, right? That little space in time where, you know, it was between Obama and now the Biden administration.
Humanitarian work is my guess.
No,
top guess.
no.
Working with the homeless.
No interest in that. In fact, he was part of a consulting group specifically having to do with getting defense contractors in the same room as government officials.
No, really? In essence, lobbying.
This is literally Bill O'Reilly with the what is it, Susan Rice, where he was like, oh, what's that? Is it the Green New Deal? Oh no, she's invested in an oil company. He's qualified for the job. Okay, cool. He did some stuff for the defense contractors and stuff, so he understands the industry more and got experience directly in the field he was working in. Okay.
For defense contractors between government jobs at State Department? Huh. Well, golly gee, I bet this is giant news to the people in Washington, and the reporters are going to clamor to cover this obvious conflict of interest.
So as Washington Post reported, let's go to graphic 5 here. Blinken played a similar role when NATO was at an impasse over whether to provide modern tanks to Ukraine. At the time, Germany was hesitant to approve the...
It's his job. It's his job to do this. Of course, he played a role.
Transfer of Leopard 2 tanks, a roadblock that was overcome when Blinken pushed the White House to approve the transfer of M1 Abrams tanks over Pentagon reluctance. Now, prior to Blinken serving as Secretary of State for Biden's administration, Blinken ran a defense-related consulting firm known as West Exec. In fact, when Biden tapped him to be part of his administration, I remember researching this and writing a piece on this because I thought that there was, you know, some conflicts of interest here. And surely with the development of this war in Ukraine, the conflicts of interest are pretty brazen and pretty obvious. So West Exec did not respond when asked for a list of its clients, but according to people familiar with the arrangement, they include Shield AI, a San Diego-based company that makes surveillance drones, and signed a contract worth as much as $7.2 million with the Air Force to deliver artificial intelligence tools to help drones operate in combat missions. Blinken and Michelle Flournoy, another person who is close with Biden, have served as advisors to Pine Island Capital, which raised $218 million for a new fund to finance investments in military and aerospace companies, among other targets. So Blinken has a history of working on behalf of defense contractors and getting them sweet deals with the federal government. Yeah. And that's exactly what I see here. I see this as an opportunity to make money for these defense contractors. It's pretty disgusting because do we really trust the Pentagon when they can't even pass a single financial audit? They haven't passed one. Do we really?
Wait. The Pentagon was saying not to send F-16s. Why are we not trusting the Pentagon now, Anna? I'm so confused. I'm so confused at the arguments they're trying to make, dude. The Pentagon doesn't want to send the tanks, and the Pentagon said no, don't do that. Why would the Pentagon say that?
I guess they're not in it for the money. It's national security interest, maybe.
That's right. So these see, this is how the disinformation works, right? So you hear them say this all the time, that they do it especially with the shells, the artillery shells, right? Yeah. So they're saying that it's a scam for the defense contractors to make money because they're using the shells, so they have to make more, right? And they say this, and it comes from NATO constantly saying, hey, we can't use these shells, we need them for ourselves, right? So NATO's goal is always to be prepared for a complete Russian invasion. So anything less than that, they're going to be like, hey, we can't do that. Same with the Pentagon. The Pentagon's and NATO's job is to make sure that they hoard weapons. You know, it's not who gets weapons.
And it also, they are replacing weapons, but they're replacing old, outdated weapons. The M4s that they sent, they're getting replaced with the new SIGs. Like, this was a contract set up years ago. The weapon has been developed. Like, this is not a short-term thing.
And we do this. We do these types of, like, obviously the leases are going to be a lot bigger in this case, but we do this type of shit all the time. Selling these things.
Yeah.
We're the #1 arms sailor. Of course we do. We sell them our old shit all the time.
They have trust and faith in them in regard to where the military weaponry is ending up. Do they have a full accounting of it?
No, of course not. Don't be ridiculous.
Okay.
And so all this is to enrich those folks. But guys, at the same time, the Ukrainians should get our help. And the Russians definitely invaded them, and they were definitely wrong. And it is definitely an imperial exercise. And so we're stuck in the middle ground here, where we want to help. Good people like us want to help the Ukrainians.
Okay, then push for peace talks.
Without getting robbed in the process.
Yeah, peace talks. Okay, we don't actually. The United States government isn't actually interested in ending the war. Let's be 100% honest about that.
Well, that's definitely true.
No peace with fascists.
How does the United States end the war?
Well, that's a question too.
Do we go in and we force Russia to stop? But that sounds like an escalation. Why is it the United States? Why is it our job to end the war now? Why do we run Ukraine? Are we in charge here? You have to get behind this America like overlord mindset.
Yeah.
Who cares? So what about peace talks? First of all, fuck peace talks. What you do is you negotiate ceasefires for your advantage.
Yes.
So ceasefires are way different than peace talks. That's what you want to look for. You want to look at ceasefires like imagine like if they negotiated like a ceasefire with Wagner in the middle of Bakhmut, right? This Wagner could get times to like flood their convicts back up, you know?
Yeah.
Those things can happen, and also they can happen just on like the battlefield command level too.
Yes, they can. Yeah. Also, it's like the only people pushing for peace talks right now is Russia and China. And
They're
funnily
asking
enough,
Ukraine to surrender.
well, yes, right, and that's their peace, and that's what China wants as well, because it sets up a precedent for their invasion of Taiwan.
Also, attach this information campaign. They also have to put on this like story that people are being forced to fight for Ukraine.
Yes, which is projection.
Because they're not encouraging peace talks, because that is not in the Ukrainian interest, if you ask me. And the reason is that the U.S. has a separate interest, is because the longer the war goes, the more Russia.
Oh, wait. You're saying that we're not negotiating peace talks is not in Ukraine's interest. Fuck you, dude. Ukraine's interest is not peace talks. And the peace talks, we literally, what are we going to do? Hey, you should negotiate peace talks.
Yeah.
No,
at the end of
he
the
says
day,
no. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then also Ukraine's interests are not peace talks, because peace talks would involve surrendering land to an invading army. He said it himself. It's an imperialist act. And
also, like I was saying again, you want to go back to danger of coups. It would piss a lot of people off if Zelensky rolled over. The risk of a coup and those hands ending up in like a different type of group
drastically increases. And I guarantee these guys whinge about Azov as well. And it likely a group akin to that would rise up and take over, realistically.
That's the main issue. It's not that they're fascists that we care about arming them. It's that they could later be a threat to NATO.
Yeah. And, from our national security interest, the people in charge want Russia as depleted as possible.
It's a proxy war.
So it's a proxy war, and we're not the ones that are directly involved. Russia is. They're the ones that are getting weaker and weaker and weaker as their military gets depleted and run into the ground. And even if they quote unquote win and get parts of Ukraine, still their military will have been devastated. Their pipelines will have been shut down.
Or
the sanctions will
blown up.
Yeah, or blown up, and that literally happened. And it's probably one of our allies, if not us directly.
Right.
And so we will take advantage of all the things that happen because of the.
Maybe Russia shouldn't have invaded. Russia calculated these risks.
They must have, right?
Yes.
It must have been involved.
Risk calculation is going on all the time.
And they'd still have their pipelines if they never invaded. Tough shit.
Well, also, it's the same thing with Vietnam, right? Where we were so stupid thinking that these are just like simple fighters who haven't had like 20 years of combat experience,
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, the Ukrainians have been fighting in against the Russians, trying to move separatists into the Donbass since 2014. The entire conflict was because Russia sent neo-Nazis from the Russian imperial movement and Wagner into Donbass because people in Donbass told them to fuck off. Like, this is a playbook
not only
that they've
there's
been
also
using.
Like Georgians and Chechens that have joined.
Yeah. And Georgians make sense.
Syrians.
Like this same thing happened in 2008. This is exactly the same playbook Russia used, except Georgia didn't have the support of everyone.
A war. And so but that puts good people in the same basket as people who have no interest in humanitarian issues and are just trying to make a buck off this. And it's an uncomfortable basket to be in.
And keep in mind that this is solidifying the alliance between Russia and China. So while this is a proxy war and the thinking among the State Department is that this is weakening Russia, it is also strengthening its relationship with China. I should also note that China happens to be one of the countries that is pushing for peace talks, but the United States, because of its interest in wanting to weaken Russia, is really unwilling to push.
Unfucking believable. No, China is only working with Russia because they're aware that Russia is weak. China is going to fuck Russia over as soon as this is all over. I've heard things that Russians are inundated with Chinese technology as a result. So now they've got Chinese spyware in their country. Russia's fucked. Russia is fucked.
You know what? I'm realizing that this is the CNN effect. What they're actually doing is they're going right wing and trying to appeal to these people.
Interesting.
It's the CNN effect. Now, Fox is going to be disgraced, so they're trying to come up and being like, we're the neutral ones.
Interesting.
for that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the United States intends to continue this war for at least 18 months, if not longer. If you don't believe me, take a look at this final video.
President Zelensky has been begging for them for more than a year. President Biden has resisted until this point. So what changed?
Nothing changed. I mean, we have been evolving our support.
Yeah, this is standard foreign policy. It's they say that people critique it saying it's supposed to be designed to make like the enemy bleed. They said the same thing with like Mujahideen and all this stuff, but it's calculating risk. You know, we can't just like throw these weapons immediately at them and lose them like we did in Iran with the Tomcats. This is like classic Bidenist policy of like the escalation of packages depending on how well they're performing with those packages. It's all risk assessment.
Yeah.
Constantly.
It always is.
For Ukraine as
and
the
it's
war
not risk assessment of escalation with Russia. We know it's not going to happen. It's risk assessment of the money.
evolves. And when we're talking about fighter aircraft, that's really not designed to help us in the immediate future here with the counteroffensive.
The training alone, John, could take 18 months, the defense secretary.
Well, that's an initial estimate. As the wars evolve, we've also started to have conversations with the Ukrainians about long-term defense needs, because when this war is over, whenever that is and under what conditions, they're still going to have a long border with Russia. They're still going to need significant defense support.
So at least 18 months just to train the soldiers in Ukraine how to use the F-16s.
Okay.
At least 18 months. So no end
And
in
he
sight.
said if the war ends, they're still going to need the defensive thing with Russia. He was justifying it. He literally put in a clause there in his speech that implied that the war could end before the F-16s even arrive. He implied that heavily.
Let's just be absolutely clear about that. And in those 18 months, I'm just curious, how many times does the Biden administration intend to tap Congress to appropriate hundreds of billions of dollars more to assist in the war effort in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Well, by the way, simultaneously nickel and diming the American people, right? Right now, Biden is engaging in negotiations with Kevin McCarthy to raise the debt ceiling, and he is seriously considering work requirements for Americans who are so poor, who are so poverty-stricken that they would need to do prove that they're looking for work or engaging in work in order to get welfare benefits that they clearly need because they're struggling financially. So nickel and dime the
What would you rather have him do? Would you rather have him not negotiate and like see if the Republicans are fucking around and see if they will? You want those people? You want those capitalist elite you want to test them to see what happens? What you want them to use the 14th Amendment and then be accused of like excessive overreach? Why don't you just talk about how ridiculous this type of fucking hostage negotiation over the American people is? Like, why aren't we really looking at what the Republicans are doing with this? People don't understand like how important the debt ceiling negotiation is. It seems like it's an irrelevant past because, of course, it's supposed to be irrelevant. It's like, hey, do you not want to breathe today? Like, you're always going to choose to breathe today.
American people continue this now new endless war with Russia. It's a proxy war. It's just, I don't know. I think that the way the US has now decided to handle this is pretty disastrous and continues to get worse.
So some estimates have them being trained by the fall. It's impossible to know. But the bottom line is Ukraine is doing a spring and summer offensive. They will definitely not, the F-16s will definitely not be ready by that offensive. But I also want to temper your expectations there because I see a ton of BS in the mainstream media. Honestly, nothing but BS in that regard. Why? If you are new to politics and news and you didn't follow what happened during the Iraq War, Afghanistan, et cetera, you might not know that whenever the New York Times starts writing about a new offensive and around the corner after that, we're going to win the conflict. That is untrue 100% of the time. I heard that same story in Iraq, I don't know, 80 times. Oh, a new offensive, and then we're going to end the insurgency right after that. It never ends. It just goes on and on and on forever, for decade after decade. And every time the Pentagon says us or our allies are doing a surge and we're going to win right after the surge, it is literally never, ever true. Okay, so don't buy that load of crap. And then the last point.
I think I disagree with the surge, but I believe it worked. The surge, and then like the issue is that we pulled out, and then ISIS rose, and then they took our Abrams tanks.
Point is, so as you saw them there, well, even after the war, we're going to have to keep sending them weapons. In other words, we found a nice little piggy bank here, and we're going to turn this into one way of looking at it is Israel, where we're just going to give them billions of dollars in defense spending paid for by the American taxpayer.
Great.
And go straight to defense contractors who one day will probably hire me for millions of dollars. Oh, that's the part of the sentence he didn't complete, but is also definitely true.
Which is great, because the US economy is dealing with a surplus right now. Just a wonderful surplus, and we have unlimited resources to spend on forever wars. Great.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube.
This guy said, "Hey guys," a little too many times in this. It's like, listen, guys. Okay, guys.
I'm pretty sure
all right,
that's
guys.
his thing.
Okay, guys. Wait, listen, guys. Bro, have you heard this dude like talk to Hassan about why he's an idiot for not supporting capitalism, and then he's here like crying about money and like, oh, the stock market.
Did he really?
Oh my god, dude, it's so funny. He like
Amazing.
Hassan tries to like debate him, and like he's sitting there talking to dude. This debate, he's sitting there talking about the risk of the capital investment. He's talking about risk of capital investment to Hassan, and like why he deserves more wages of being a CEO because he put the money up and all that stuff.
Boy, I think Hassan might be the worst thing to ever come out of the Young Turks.
I don't know. That's up there. That right there might have been one of the worst things to come out of the Young Turks.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.